morning, Toastmasters. I lost a very dear friend of mine not too long ago to cancer, and it was a life changer for me. And it wasn't necessarily his death that was the life changer, but it was his diagnosis. And I'll never forget the day he called me up on the phone, crying, saying, "Hey, I have brain cancer, and I'm going to die soon." And that was the last punch in the mouth that I needed to understand that our time here is not guaranteed. And I made a decision at that time to not sweat the small stuff anymore and take the biggest bite out of life I could take every single day and embrace every single minute. And I'd like to share with you kind of the 4 guidelines that I have recurring in my head that have led me to be the happiest I've ever been in my life. And the first one is the realization that life is tough, and we all say it, but it truly is. It's like a big invisible hand pushing down on us. Life exacts a constant force on all of us, and it does not discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're young or old, rich or poor, it doesn't matter where you come from. Life truly is tough, and sometimes that invisible hand can push so hard, it could push you right into the ground, as in 6 feet underground. And this realization tells me 2 things. It tells me, 1, for me to proceed on, I've got to keep pushing up against that hand for me to have another day. And 2, it tells me that life actually is pretty fair, because we're all swimming against this current. And the second realization I have is something I entered in my journal when I was 19 years old, and it's what I call the 90-10 rule. And the 90-10 rule states that I can control about 90% of what happens to me. And of the 10% out of my control, I have 100% control on how I deal with that 10%. And that tells me I have a very high level of control over what I do and what happens to me in my life. And the third realization is what I call the choice principle. And the choice principle says that every single choice that I've ever made in my life, no matter how small, did I put my left sock on first or my right sock, or how large, who did I choose as my mate, what did I choose as my career, all these choices have led me to be right here, right now, at this point in time. And the choice principle tells me that I am in control of my own destiny. And I couple all of those things with a daily examination of emotions, not only my own, but the emotions of other people. And I feel like we all have like this emotional threshold. It's like a spherical membrane, where inside the sphere, we make all of our decisions based on a balance of our intellect, our logic, our reasoning, and our emotions. We're in balance. But when we let our emotions dictate our decisions and our choices, we're outside of our emotional threshold. And typically, like anger, for instance, when anger takes over and you make your decisions based on anger, it can be very hurtful. And when anger turns into infuriation and you get way outside of your threshold, it's like a big wrecking ball. And a great deal of damage can be done. And the emotional threshold can change in size throughout your life. And an example of that would be a soldier who goes into battle. And he may come out back into society if he survives, and his emotional threshold may have expanded exponentially. And that force, that invisible hand pushed down so hard on him that he'll never experience that again. And he goes through life with a very balanced, big emotional threshold. And conversely, that soldier can come out of battle, and his emotional threshold could shrink down to be very small. And life can be very hard, even the simplest things. So I make it a daily practice to try and push my emotional threshold out a little bit bigger every day and stay balanced. And when I find myself on the receiving end of hurtful words, spiteful words, I tell myself that that person is outside of their emotional threshold, and I'm not going to let them push me outside of my emotional threshold. And quite often what happens in that scenario is that person comes back into their emotional threshold. And that makes me truly realize that I not only have control over myself, I have a degree of control over my environment. So all of these thoughts, there are all these back programs that run in my head every day of my life, tell me conclusively that I am steering my own ship. I am determining my own destiny. And I have chosen to be happy. And it's working. And for any of those of you who aren't really as happy as you want to be out there, I'm telling you, you have the power to make the right choices. And you are steering your own ship. So why not grab the tiller and steer into the sun? Because happiness is your choice. Thank you, Toastmasters.